And Lloyd, how long you been a student for A Course in Miracles? Student teacher.
I started to do the course in 1997.
Nice. When I reached out to you, I loved your answer when I said, "Is there anything that you want to talk about in particular?" And you said, "Well, let's let the Holy Spirit take it away, and we'll go where we go." Um,
Yeah.
which I think is a perfect way to start talking about A Course in Miracles. Uh, I always like to talk as if the majority of people who come in know very little or absolutely nothing about the course. So when you say let's let the Holy Spirit lead us, what do you mean by the Holy Spirit?
Well, some call it the Holy Spirit. Other people call it your higher mind. Uh, some people say it's Jesus. Some people call it Buddha. I mean, it it's just something that knows a hell of a lot more than you do. That's built within all of us. It knows past, present, and future. In other words,
So uh, when we are when we're surrendering to the Holy Spirit, we could basically say that's the entire nature of the course. Is we are supposed to remove the blocks that keep us from hearing the Holy Spirit in every present moment.
that's absolutely correct. Because when we appear to come into this world, we've forgotten who we are completely, and we really have no communication with the Holy Spirit until we've been around for a little while, and we discover that this isn't the best place to be. And we look, like the course says, we look for another way. Um, the course says choose once again. There's many ways to put it, and usually it takes us to get desperate before we do that. Usually we have to get hit by either a 2x4 or a 2x6.
Uh, that was certainly in my case. It was a decade of, and this was the '90s, late '80s to the all through the '90s. A decade of slowly, sometimes not so slowly, drinking myself, literally to points of destruction. And I, I was, as you just said, metaphorically hitting myself with a 2x4. Uh, and I was graced with the answer: yoga, meditation, and A Course in Miracles. And all three have been just literally a lifesaver for me.
Well, that certainly is it's a game changer for everybody that starts the course. In a lot of cases, when you get down to what they call the fifth stage of development, Ken Wapnick used to say that's when all hell breaks loose. But we really won't get into that yet. But yeah, it's a journey like no other journey, and Course in Miracles is. I don't really think there's anything else like it in the world. It's probably the fastest spiritual way home of any way that you could choose at this moment. It saves you a lot of time. I mean, there's thousands of different ways. Don't get me wrong. Of course, there's only one of them. It says that. But for me, for sure, because of some of the experiences it gave me, it certainly speeds up the process. That's the one thing I can say about the course is that you don't really have to believe what it's saying. I found that just by doing it, I was getting experience from outside the dream, and in other words, the Holy Spirit sort of takes over and it it gains your trust. It's not the other way around. You don't have to trust the Holy Spirit. It actually works to gain your trust.
Uh, you said lots of different ways, and if I'm not mistaken, you actually tried lots of different ways before you came to the course, right?
Oh, absolutely. I did about 15 years of the New Age sector. I read literally hundreds of books. Went to a couple of different teachers, and one of those teachers taught me what I didn't want to know. I was there for 10 years. It was a place in Yelm in Washington, It was called Ramp to School of Enlightenment. Many people have heard about it, but it was an experience. Eventually, I had to leave there because it was really all about survival of the fittest. They had us building what I call underground shelters in the mountains. Well, anywhere. I happened to be in the mountains, and storing 10 years worth of food and water and all that kind of stuff. And then one day I woke up and decided this is not for me. I went to another teacher called, I don't know if you've heard of this guy, Drimbella Melchizedek. You ever heard of him?
Yeah, Flower of Life.
Yes. Well, I participated in that for quite a while I was still going to Rampa, and then that really persuaded me to leave that school in Yelm because Drumbella was he sort of turned my life around. He told
I
me, you don't want to be building shelters and storing food for 10 years. He said that's sort of not trusting,
right.
and that hit me deeply. And then he was a guy that I think he was a trigger in my dream. It was like I was waiting for that trigger because I remember seeing him on a video, and it was like instant recognition. It was like I have to go and see this guy, and I don't care what it takes to do that. And it did take me quite a bit of perseverance to finally get to see him. I went to see him for I think it was 8 days or something in Lake
Right.
Tahoe, and turned my life around. Yeah,
I read about him in Bob Frisell's book. Uh, nothing you read in this book nothing you read in this book is true, but it's exactly the way everything happened. I believe is
that's
the
it.
title.
Yeah, a
Uh,
great title.
yeah, and it was a great book. Doing the breath work, one of my first experiences with, uh, especially outside of yoga, doing the breath work, the rebirthing breath. Very powerful.
Yeah, he's a very, very, very powerful person. He was the first entity I'd ever actually seen an aura around him. I'd never experienced that before, and when you spend time with him, it's just like he emanates this love that it's beyond your expectation, and I'd never had that experience before.
What is his teachings? If you were to sum up his teachings, and then maybe a comparison with the Course of Miracles.
Um, he taught in parables, almost like Jesus. And right now, after doing the course for so many years, I can't really relate to his teachings at this time, but it was what I needed at that time. And he definitely, one of the things he said to me was, I come from a place that's so beautiful that I had to lose my memory in order to stay here.
Wow.
Yeah, that was quite a statement. And
Yeah.
by spending personal time with him, and he told stories um, that were like what Jesus would tell. They were parable stories, but they related to the truth of this world and who we are. And he taught me that I needed to really trust the process and not to hide in the mountains and worry about, protecting the body and with food and water for
Right.
10 years. I gave it up after I came back from seeing him. Within a month, I was in a community. I owned 160 acres at that time in the mountains. And myself and another lady had invited people in to, build little places on our land and, take part in that part of the journey about trying to save the body, in other words. And when I went back from Drimbello, I told everybody there at the time that that's it for me. I'm no longer going to be tied up in survival of the fittest. And so I really, really did I don't know if you call it a 360-degree turn in my consciousness, and went from one extreme of trying to rely on my own means to survive to trusting in something I couldn't see. It was a big switch.
Yeah, huge switch and not a easy one to make. A
No,
lot of, you could say, almost blind faith, a leap.
it was, and I lost all my friends at the time, and I lost my property. I left there with very little money, but was promised a job when I left there back in Toronto. This was in British Columbia. So yeah, it was a huge decision because I was there with, I owned that property, on my own cabin, beautiful surroundings, and no bills. We're off the grid,
Right.
so
I
we had,
suppose. I
yeah.
suppose they're still probably stocking food to this day, preparing for whatever great emergency is going to happen.
Oh, people are still doing it. Yeah, and I mean, it wasn't a little bit of food. I'm talking 10 years worth, ten
Right.
years worth of food and water. And I built them. Like I built them myself and another for built the underground shelters for just not just myself, but for other people. So it was quite a project. I mean, I'm glad I did it. It was part of my journey. As I don't know if you understand. I'm sure you do that. You know how the course says the script is written,
Right.
and it was just part of my script. It was
Um,
a growing part.
when you were when you were doing the Flower of Life, did you do the Merkaba meditation?
I did the Merkaba meditation. Yeah, and it's a very complicated meditation. You probably know it,
I
and
don't know it. I know of it. I always found it fascinating.
yeah, very fascinating. It's it's not an easy meditation. It is after you do it for a while. It becomes
Right.
second nature. But it's not just an ordinary meditation. It has to do with um, sacred geometry, and it's about visualizing certain shapes in your mind, along with something called the Fibonacci series of numbers.
Right. We have
So,
a I have a friend in the live stream who's going to be extremely happy to hear you say the Fibonacci numbers. Uh,
oh, listen, I got really deeply into that for a long time, like into sacred geometry, Fibonacci, all of that stuff. Really studied it. And a couple of books of Jim Bellows is there's volume one, volume two. It's called The Flower of Life, and it's really all about that. In fact, the whole meditation is in there.
and when we're doing these practices, uh, it's really the exact thing that we need at that moment, but
Absolutely
not the exact thing that we need ultimately.
right. I mean, we're all in a as the course says, we're all in an individualized curriculum, and that's different for all of us, and we all experience have different experiences. And
When did you?
you go from like when you're in the New Age section. It's the New Age is there's a lot of good stuff in the New Age. I mean, I loved it, the conversation with God and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
But it's really teaching you, to balance body, mind, and spirit. And of course, when you get into A Course in Miracles, what threw me for a loop was the fact that the Course says, no, it's nothing about the body. It's about mind and spirit. And then, of course, it teaches you that, you're not a body.
Right.
And, it's a process.
When did you know all these practices that none of them were going to ultimately bring you what you needed?
Sorry, could
When
just,
you were doing all of these practices,
yeah.
at what point? When did you know? Excuse me, that none of them were going to deliver what you ultimately needed.
Well, it was after my trip to Drumballows. I knew that I was going in the wrong direction at that point, and I didn't certainly know how I was going to come about making that big change. I just knew deep in my heart that I was definitely going in the wrong direction, and I wanted to change that. And I think what happened for me was because I made such a drastic change in a short period of time. Um, the universe kicked in and really started to direct me, like almost from day one when I made that shift. I started to get some really crazy experiences.
When did the Course of Miracles enter in?
That was 1997, and my it was when my ex wife at the time brought me the Course in Miracles book, and and I was still living out there with the people, that had the UGs, and but I informed them all that I was no longer interested in doing that, and that I actually asked all of them to reconsider, but nobody wanted to reconsider, including my ex. So
Uh,
we eventually. That's why I left there. I just said, no, okay, I can't do this any longer, and I left.
did you know the course was for you right away, or did
Oh
it take
no,
time?
actually, no, I didn't. For me, I read it and I wanted to flush it down the toilet. To be quite honest with you, because it went against everything that I'd learned up to that point. I'd read, and when I say hundreds, I literally read hundreds of New Age books,
Right.
and they all made the world real. And here's the course telling me that the world's not real. And I didn't understand that, of course, when I first started. That's an experience you get after doing the course for a little while. It doesn't come
S-
to you all at once. In fact, we actually we resist it.
Right. It's sort of amazing that we ever get past the first 50 lessons because those first 50, wow, they
Yeah,
knock you for a loop.
they absolutely do. Yeah, because it's such a change in how the course is. This is a course in mind training.
Right.
Well, when we start a course in miracles, we don't even know what the mind is. We don't even know we have a mind. We associate what the course is talking about as to being the body and the brain being the mind, and that's not true. And it took me even 10 years to really understand that aspect of the course, that it wasn't talking to me, the guy that was reading the book. It was talking about the mind that's dreaming the dream, and that's a big shift when you get that to that point, because the course gets really simple after that. It's not complicated. When you're reading it from the personal eye, it doesn't make sense.
And it can definitely take some time for that shift to happen. It did
Absolutely.
quite a bit for me. I picked up the book probably in 93 or so. I started reading about it in the late 80s. Uh,
Okay.
I didn't complete the workbook lesson until 2007. Uh, you've probably heard this too. The reason why the course is a perennial seller is because people keep throwing their original copies away and buying a new one over and over again.
That's so true. I think we've got
I
about six. We got six copies around here right now, I think. Yeah.
I I still have my original copy, but it has been a paperweight, a book stop. It has been packed away. It has been dragged from house to house. Uh, you don't want for the longest time. You don't want to hear the message, but you know you have to hear the message at the same time.
Absolutely. Yeah. I still have my original copy too, and I mean the bindings have given out on it. It's just like pages are falling out of it, and the whole thing's outlined and all. But it stays in my bookshelf because that's the one that got me started. So, and
So,
I have another one signed by Ken Wapnick. I have
oh
one
wow,
signed by Gary Renard and one by David Hofmeister, and I got a collection here. And Cindy
why?
Renard. Yeah.
Oh, awesome. Why are those first 50 lessons so hard?
Sorry, what? Why? What?
Why are those first 50 lessons so difficult for us?
Well, because uh, don't forget we're addicted to the ego thought system. You know, it's like when you get into the first part of the course when it tells you none of the thoughts you think are your own thoughts. I didn't get that. Like you read it, but it doesn't really make any sense. What do you mean my thoughts are not my own thoughts? And that took me a while, to get to the point where I actually had an experience of that where I discovered that the thoughts that I think that I was thinking weren't wasn't me that was thinking them. They were coming from an outside source, what the course calls the ego. And you learn after a while that the when you understand that God didn't make the body, that the ego made the body for its purpose, the brain being part of that purpose. You're from the moment you're born, you're constantly receiving ego communication, and until it comes your time to awaken, and you start to break down those barriers, and you become aware of a deeper thought that's not coming from the ego. But that takes a lot of mind training. That's why the course says it's a course in mind training. It doesn't happen overnight. You don't hear the Holy Spirit overnight. And it depends where you are on the ladder too, because uh, we've all had past lives, and really don't know what we've accomplished in those lives. And according to the course, we've led thousands of lives, and they weren't just wasn't one following the other. The course teaches you that all our lives happened at the same time, and that right at this moment we're reviewing one of those lifetimes, as it says in lesson 158. You're reviewing mentally that which has gone by, and that's a huge understanding, to really fathom that you're watching a movie and the movie's already over.
which is good news still, isn't it?
Absolutely. And that's
Because
why
as
the
you just
court
said,
says your only function is forgiveness. That's it. That's your only function. But who is it that's forgiving? That's the important part of Course in Miracles. At first, we start forgiving our father for whatever he did, or our mother, or our brother, or our next door neighbor. And the course describes that as that's forgiveness to destroy.
right?
And eventually, you learn what the true meaning of forgiveness is. It's actually forgiving your mind's miscreations. You're the dreamer. You're the dreamer of the dream. Not this guy. The, the dreamer, the dream is dreaming this guy. And once you get that connection, your journey really speeds up. You start to get a lot of spiritual experiences because you're starting to really understand the the absolute joy of the Course of Miracles. That it's teaching you that there is no world, there is no you, and none of this stuff that's going on in the world, especially right now. It's chaos,
It is.
and you can sit back and literally chuckle because none of it's happening. Nothing.
Did you?
That's what the atonement is. As you know, the atonement says if you accept the atonement for yourself, what you're saying is that nothing happened. That's a big stretch, right?
All right. Do you think that's the hardest thing to convey to someone? That we talk about forgiveness is realizing that what we think our brother did never actually occurred, uh, and everyone wants to argue for their wounds. Everyone wants to argue for their hurt, for their pain.
Yeah.
Uh, they'll show you the scar. Well, this says otherwise, or this broken heart says otherwise, or uh,
Yep. Absolutely. It's a big shift because we do think we're victims. The Course of Miracles says you're not a victim. You can't be a victim of the world you see. And you don't understand that at first, because you want to be a victim. This actually happened to me. Oh no, this person did that, or this happened to me. And when you really get what the mind training is teaching you is that you made it all up. You can't be a victim because you made it.